So Ray, I'm so taken by your story. What you're sharing and what you've gone through is so heart wrenching, and it's also it's also a story of, like, so many young people have that drive and that hunger to want to get themselves a better life. But the difference is that under your circumstances and in your environment, yours was an illegal option that was harmful to other people. But in terms of the drive and the hunger that you had, there's no difference between what a young person's going through who's just trying to make a better life for themselves versus a young person whose parents give them everything, who's trying to make a better life for themselves. It's just the difference is that the path you were on was a path of destruction for yourself and for other people. But I want you, everyone who's listening, to reserve judgment and to think that people are doing the best that they can, even if it's not right, morally, ethically, and it's not right. We're not sitting there condoning that drug dealing is okay, but we're saying that Ray was doing what he had to do to survive. And then, like he said, the monster took over. So you left off that you morally told this beautiful young woman who had children that you weren't going to sell to her. Please continue your story, Ray.
And of course, the saying goes, if I don't sell to that person, somebody else will. And for many years, I actually believed that. Um, and but today it's not true, and I'll explain that later on. And as I continue my story, um, the the path I took in Vegas, like I said, I was Vegas was like criminal college for me. So I didn't only get involved in selling crack cocaine. I started getting involved in selling powder cocaine kilos, but then I started getting involved in selling marijuana. I started getting involved in selling meth, and I got involved in credit card fraud, chop shops.
What's
I,
chop shops?
a chop shop is where, say, if I was dealing in Porsche 911s, which are cars, high-end vehicles. Say somebody, and what I would do is I would buy a car from the auction, whether it's a theft recovery or whether it was in an accident. And a theft recovery, usually the vehicle's stripped down. Somebody steals the car and takes the parts, the doors, the hood, the motor, everything. So I would buy the vehicle from the auction with the title and go back and steal someone else's car and put all the parts on my Porsche and resell it. So a chop shop is where you take the vehicles to a shop, a warehouse, you strip all the vehicles down and you cut up the frame and you dispose of it somewhere. So I was getting involved, and there was big money in that too. I mean, you're talking about you're making 20, 30, $40,000 off of a car. I'd say 20,000 off of a car. And
And
so, I
this
mean,
this was probably 30 years ago.
this was in the 80s and the 90s.
Okay.
And then, and then I started becoming, I was like a one-stop shop. So when people wanted something, whether it was guns, whether somebody had stolen goods, whether it had, I mean, and then I just, everything escalated. I mean, like, I was open to business. If there was money to be made in Vegas, then I was in on it.
Hmm.
I think I had contacts where, with some Italian connections in Vegas. I had contact with Mexican cartel connections. I had contacts with the streets. I had contacts with the casinos. So I was dialed in just about every area. Uh, because my thing was, if I was going to do it, I was going to do it big, and I was going to go 100%. And which was the wrong way to think, but that was just how my brain is wired, and that's just the motivation I had to be successful, and whether it was illegal or legal. And then eventually I actually, I knew that I couldn't be driving around a fancy car and not having a job, so I bought into a body shop and a dealership, and I actually started having income coming in every month. I had a check showing that, okay, yeah, I'm making money legally. So I was smart enough to, know that I can't own a house and I can't be driving around in all these fancy cars and not have income coming in, because in my mentality was that, Uncle Sam was worse than the mob. They want their money. They want their tax money.
Mhm.
So I said, well, let me give Uncle Sam what he, give him his money and let me just do my thing. So
So
that
were
was
you laundering money through your businesses, meaning taking
no,
legal money and then putting it into a legal venture?
yes, I
Okay.
was. So even when I got incarcerated, the feds were wondering, where did you get all this money? And luckily, I had a lawsuit where I actually got a settlement, and that saved my butt. I
Mm,
had proof of it,
mm.
so they were like, they didn't believe it, but they could.
There's nothing they could do.
No, there's nothing they can do.
Okay.
So as time went on, my Vegas, like I said, my criminal college in Vegas, I just, like I said, I was everywhere as far as money was to be made. And then a friend of mine from Chicago, he owned the alarm company, and so what we would do is we'd go to storage units, right? And the storage units, we would rent a space in a storage unit, and we would go after hours and we'd pick all the locks, open them up, because he was a locksmith. That's what he did. He owned an alarm company. He would pick the locks, we would open up the storage units, write inventory, what was good, what wasn't, shut it, and go through all the buildings. And then whatever was good, we would come back at night, right before, when the office was closed. Sometimes the gate would still be open. We would get a U-Haul truck and we would load everything up, and then sell it on the black market, whether they were TVs, whatever. So I get a phone call one day saying he had went on his own with another partner, and he had ran into Wayne Newton's storage unit. So there was millions of dollars of artwork, which we had no idea why somebody would put millions of dollars worth of stolen. Well, actually, we didn't even know they were stolen at the time.
Oh, the
Um,
artwork was stolen
well,
from,
I take that back. I take that back. We didn't know they were. I'm sorry. They were supposed to be hand delivered, according to the articles that I read, to a millionaire in Texas. Okay, supposedly they were hand delivered. They weren't reported stolen at the time. I apologize. But when we got them, it was a whole warehouse full of stuff that belonged to Wayne Newton's. There was a bunch of personal stuff, but the paintings were probably the most valuable. And then so my my partner that was involved in these in storage unit heists, which you want, what I call, he asked me if I can get rid of the artwork. So I told him, you know what, let me make some phone calls. And so I had somebody in Spain that was interested, but it was going to take months for him to come to the US. And these guys didn't want to wait. They're breathing down my neck. They're like, no, we need to get rid of them. And I'm like, this is stolen artwork. I says, you're not selling cocaine, which sells itself. You're not selling freaking tamales on the corner. I mean, this is gonna take a while. And they're like, well, you need to hurry up. And so I one of my clients, or one of my car guys, used to work on my Porsches. He introduced me to the ex-city manager of Coachella, California. And he was also an interpreter for an attorney for Spanish speaking clients. And he happened to know two Colombians. Well, I didn't know this until later on down the line. The Colombian that he was representing got busted with a vessel of cocaine, and
a
the two
vessel.
a
Okay.
vessel, a whole ship load of
Oh,
cocaine.
like not a container, but a
No,
ship.
a
Wow.
shipload of
Wow.
cocaine.
Wow.
And so the attorney, my co-defendant, which was the ex-city manager of Coachella, was the interpreter for the Colombian with the attorney during his legal battle issues. And there was always two Colombians that would show up and go to court. Why my co-defendant thought he could approach these two men and ask them if they wanted to buy the artwork, I have no idea. But anyways, we connected with them. And being Colombia, you connect Colombians with cocaine. I do, at least.
Mm.
So I told them, hey, see if they want to trade the artwork for cocaine. And at first they didn't. They like, you know what, no, no. But then after a while, they're like, okay, you know what, yeah, let's do a deal. Let's do a deal for cocaine. So we agreed to 110 pounds of cocaine in exchange for the artwork. And we actually met in California at the Irvine Marriott to do the transaction. It was in a hotel, which I was questioning the whole thing the whole time. Like, why are we in a hotel? Why are we doing a drug transaction in a hotel? But so supposedly they knew the managers of the hotel. They had the inside scoop. We're good. They had a plane by the John Wayne Airport full of cocaine. You know, they gave us all this story, which deep inside I felt something was wrong. So we went to go do the trade uh, in a hotel room, and there was connecting doors to the suite. And I already knew, like in my heart, like something is not right here. Something is definitely not right. So when the Colombians told me to take this, you know, they bought 2 suitcases, 25 and 25 kilos in each suitcase. And I inspected it, looked at them. It was real. And when it was time to go, they told me to grab the suitcase and, you know, let's go. And that's when the DEA agents rushed the room and arrested us. So I ended up getting arrested and charged with conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute 110 pounds of cocaine and possession with intent to distribute 110 pounds of cocaine. And I was sentenced to 235 months for a first time nonviolent drug offense. And
How
that's
many years is that?
that's 19 years, 7 months. And
Wow.
I was actually 26 years old at the time of my arrest.
Wow.
So
And by that time, you already had kids, you already had a life.
yes, I had 2 daughters and had a son. And yeah, and I was divorced, you know, but I was dating somebody, you know, at the time.
Mhm.
And I went through, you know, pre-trial. It took me I got arrested in May 25th, 1995, and I even remember the room number. It was room 1516 of the Marriott Hotel, and my arrest time was 6:05 p.m. So it's funny how you know you remember all this stuff when it happens.
Mhm.
Um, I was fighting my case from 1995 to 1997, and I was sentenced. I believe it was December 1997, and you know, when the judge handed me the sentence of 19 years, 7 months, that's you know, I was 26 years old at the time. And for me, it was like a life sentence. And what went through my mind was like, I've barely been on earth 26 years. I got to do 19 years, 7 months. It's like, wow. I was devastated because I was a first time non-violent drug offense. And the feds knew that they brought the drugs. They didn't catch me with the drugs. They caught me with artwork that was actually never even reported stolen. Even when they reached out and contacted Wayne Newton, he said it wasn't his artwork, and it was. And then he switched the story up and says that he had bought them on his Sotheby's account and hand delivered them to a millionaire or a billionaire in Texas. So whatever issue he had going on, I believe there was more to the story that why the artwork was hidden in the storage. Because my first question was, why would somebody put millions of dollars worth of artwork in a storage? So
Mhm.
obviously he had his own reasons going on.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but going forward with the sentence, it was definitely it definitely rocked me to my core, to my soul, to my spirit, getting that sentence. I remember after my sentence, I went back to my cell and I was just depressed. I crawled up in bed and I just laid there for like 3 days, just like the wind was knocked out of me. And I just like, you know, so it was like, it was devastating. But I knew for me that, you know, you know, I have faith in God. You know, thank God that I was raised to, you know, that I had a little bit of godliness in me, and that seed was planted. So, you know, I mean, the only thing I could do was pray and ask God to get me through it day by day, moment by moment, hour by hour. And it was definitely a long journey in prison, and there was a lot of life lessons in
I'm
prison.
sure. How common is it for incarcerated men to turn to God?
You know what? It's very common, but for me, I didn't want to be that guy. Oh, I'm going to prison. I'm going to become a Christian, or I'm going to be turned to God. I was like a closet kind of, like I didn't want anybody to know. I
And
was like,
why was that?
because I looked at other people in the past, like, oh, this guy's all of a sudden now he knows God. He's in prison. I was the guy that was like, oh, look at this guy. He's faking it. He's a phony.
Mm,
I didn't want to be that guy, even though deep in my heart I was like, okay, I'm turning to Him. I didn't,
yeah.
I'd be reading, I'd be reading His Word, like, kind of low key and about myself, and I'd be praying, and because I was raised that way. My grandparents, I remember growing up, I would be praying bedside with my grandparents. She would have us pray for hours, would seem like hours. So
Mhm.
I was raised that way. I was raised, I wasn't raised in a church, or, I mean, but here and there, I was influenced by, my grandparents, and,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I believe that that happened for a reason also.
Now, I don't know if this is true, but I heard that when you're a Christian, there's almost this division that happens that of like, oh, God will help you, and then you don't have necessarily the support or the backing of other inmates if you have a problem. Is that true?
Um, I think, believe it or not, I think there's a lot of inmates. It's true or not true, because if you're in prison and you're claiming you're a Christian, and you're just running with the Christians, and you don't want no part of, say I grew up South Side, which is gang related. You don't want to have no part of that. Then yeah, you're going to be, if something happens, you're going to be put to the side. But I've always ran with the gang, and I always supported them. And whenever they needed me, I was always there. So it was different, even though I still had my beliefs in my heart,
Mhm.
that, you know what, I know God's doing this for a reason. I know that God plucked me out of that madness that I was in, because there was a lot of stuff going on before I got arrested. There was threats coming my way, actually, from people from the streets and from other organizations.
Okay, so the choice was more survival, to stay connected to the gang so that they would have your back and you would have theirs.
Yes, yes.
Because is it common for inmates to get killed, like where there's an outsider who says, hey, kill so and so? Because you see that in the movies or in TV shows, but does that actually happen?
Well, there's a lot of tension, racial tension. There's a lot of tension amongst gangs. Um, it's rare to happen amongst, say, Southsiders, people from Southern California, because there's a lot of politics, and unless somebody did something that totally crosses the line, you got to ask permission to do something to somebody if you're a Southsider.
Meaning that
But
you would have to get contact with the outside head guy or head gal.
the inside head guy,
The inside, okay, before
yeah,
you can do anything, because there's a hierarchy.
yes, yeah, because it can cause trouble amongst, because you could be a Southsider, but you can be from San Pedro, or you can be from Long Beach. Even though you're Southside, you could be from San Fernando Valley, but if Wilmington is going up against San Fernando Valley, you still got to ask permission, because there's different ways to handle things. And, so, and you want to do it where you don't want the whole prison rioting over one issue, because
Right,
it could happen. Or
okay,
especially with the ratio, if there's an issue with a Latino and a Black, the first thing you do is you go to their shot callers and see if it can be resolved that way. If they refuse to resolve it, then of course the Latinos or the Blacks take matters into their own hands, and they resolve it their own way.
okay, okay,
But
through some kind of violence usually.
usually, yes.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Ray. Let's continue in our next video, and we're going to go into kind of the logistics of how incarceration works. So thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome.